There we go. I've started.
Okay.
I thought it was
So
funny, John. After all that time we spent trying to decide if we should put North America in the middle or in the bottom, not to appear. Oh man.
we practice and we practice, and now we're just winging it. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Walter for just a little bit to talk about the timing of this day and the background of and who we're honoring by using February 19th as the official date. And we're celebrating on the 16th because some of our presidents have hogged a day for next week. So we decided not to fight against that. We might make it an annual event on the Friday before the birthday that he's about to talk about. So Walter, we'll let you go with that.
Okay, so as you're probably aware, we're celebrating Arrhenius's birthday. This is the same Arrhenius where we get Arrhenius acids and bases, and of course the Arrhenius equation. He was born on February 19th, which is going to always perennially be confused where it's going to get interrupted with President's Day in some way. So like John said, we're probably going to try to celebrate this the Friday before, or the second or third Friday of February each year. He died in 1927 at 68, and he's, to me, I was reading up on him, and I have to admit, mostly just on Wikipedia, but to me it seemed like Arrhenius was like the physics and chemistry Mozart. He was reading at 3 and taught himself math by watching his dad do accounting stuff. So he's pretty a brilliant kid at a very young age. But so we know what the or not, maybe don't know what the Arrhenius equation is, but its importance, especially for stability. It determines the rates of equation or rates of reactions, and it's used in some ways to predict stability. Strangely enough, really there isn't any, the word stability does not even appear in Wikipedia regarding him. So it's not something he's known for, but we know of him as the father of stability in that way. The interesting thing is he's like the father, almost like the father of global warming, or I guess the science of global warming and climatology. He predicted the effect of CO2 on the environment and how it would affect global warming. The thing is, back then they were all worried about the return to a new ice age. So the news that carbon dioxide was going to help warm the planet was good news. so it's all relative. And anyway, just so you know, he was a brilliant man and made a lot of good contributions to science, especially for us to stability. So just a quick introduction of why we're here, why we're meeting. So with that, we wanted to, in light of, he started stability, but no one was aware of it, or no one cared. But now stability has a whole bunch of different areas, and we wanted to take a quick poll then on the areas that people are involved in for stability. So, what kind of stability your group performs. So I'll just send that poll real quick, and then we'll move on with John and an interview here.
What kind of stability? What if I did all of them? Well, we'll see. Pick the one you spent the longest time in.
Interesting. So medical devices and biopharma are the winners.
Ooh, big comers.
So,
okay, we got 17 out of 17. So everyone viewing that, or is it only visible to?
I think we're the only ones able to see it, but we have one person with cell and gene. So I guess you're the winner for uniqueness. And then over the counters, we have 2 people. The rest are there's 5 for medical devices, 5 for biopharma, and 4 for traditional pharma. And bio and traditional probably very similar. So really cool.
Nice
Thank
spread.
you very much.
Interesting 10 years from now if cell and gene therapies was 15 out of 17 there, the way things are trending. So we'll end that poll. And we'll go on to our next feature, and that's to have a chat with one of our subject matter experts. That would be Parsa Family. And we wanted to ask him some questions and then give him an opportunity to make some comments. So Parsa, thank you and welcome for being here.
Thank you very much. Congratulations in putting this a great webinar together and celebrating the stability process. Even though we all work in this process, the stability process may not be as well known to all the colleagues. So you emphasizing the importance of this process and quality is well appreciated. Thank you for having me.
We see a sign that says software over your shoulder there. So can you tell us a little bit about your role in the stability area and your company and some of the challenges that you face when you're trying to help us?
Well, thank you very much. My background, I have a graduate degree in chemistry and microbiology, and I work in pharma for many years before I joined Novatech, and now we provide software solution for stability. Because of the problems we saw in industry, one of the biggest problems in industry is digitalization. Digitalization is a process of embracing technology and enhancing day-to-day operations and ensuring that you can benefit with data. Everything we do in industry is collecting data, but what data is important and what type of data will allow you to make quality decisions. So by having a mean to look at various data points, you'll be able to make quality decisions that help manufacturing and help quality in your organization.
Thank you. And then any particular stories or challenges that you have for that? If not, I have a poll question that's related to your process. Give you a moment or two more to speak to us about that.
Sure. Well, the challenges in industry are quite a few of them. I worked both in industry and in digitalization. So we have seen different problems. One of the different big problems are as you saw, the new regulations about data integrity. How do you ensure that the data, when it's not digitalized, can be verified or can be substantiated? So the data integrity issues have brought in more of an embracement of technology and ensuring that we standardize processes, and standardization processes allow everyone to contribute to the quality of data. So one of the issues were data integrity. One of the issues that recently you have seen it everywhere is hacking. People are always worried from your own computer system, whether you're at home or you're at your workplace. Well, what happened if my infrastructure get hacked? Well, more and more, as you have seen, there are processes that's happening worldwide to ensure less and less people are getting into being hacked. But you have to be careful. Everyone has to be careful in their organizations when they receive emails that are not known, emails that have attachments, to ensure that your computer doesn't get infected or your infrastructure doesn't get infected. So there are different problems depending on the solution that you're using in your organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as you were speaking, we admitted someone identified as 983975. So I was wondering about the identity or hacking ability of that person. So I wonder if they might be able to identify themselves, and we'll fire up our poll question that's related to Parsa's specialty. Yeah, first they would have to unmute themselves. I've asked them.
Well, I hate to kick somebody out, but we really need to know who you are so we can maintain the integrity of this meeting.
Okay, with that, I'll launch the poll while Walter's taking care of that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so the poll is the scope of inventory tracking, which is one of the systems that Parsa oversees as part of the vast array of things that they're doing. I just need to get a cursor onto a different screen here. Walter, can you see that poll?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you launch it while I'm still messing with my left mouse here?
Okay. Related to inventory tracking and abilities
Yeah,
and limbs here.
that's the one.
There we go.
So this goes from the entire scope down to a more narrow one. And we were kind of interested in how much people are tracking.
While the colleagues are providing their answers, since you talk about inventory, one of the biggest problems in the inventory management is to take the right sample. As you know, in our stability chambers, we have various products and various lots of the same product. And when you have number of samples that you have to pick from an inventory, whether it's your stability chamber, whether it's your walking chamber, well, when they're all sitting beside each other, there is a possibility that you take the wrong sample.
Mhm.
So one of the benefit of computerized system and specifically barcodes or RFID, depending on infrastructure that you like to use, that will enhance and ensure that you always take the right sample in your inventory and you use the right lot of that product for the test that you need to do for that interval.
Thank you. And thank you for those responses as well for our inventory tracking. We have 43% are tracking it from manufacturing all the way to destruction. An equal number, 43%, taking it from receipt of stability area to destruction of sample. And 7% doing receipt of stability area to transfer to the laboratory. And another 7% only while in the stability chamber. So we appreciate you sharing those answers with us.
Cool. Great. So in a little bit, John's going to have some questions for Chris Latos. So in light of that, in dealing with, he's dealing with a lot of combination products. So I was thinking of a funny story I had with regarding that. Well before back, this is back in '93 when one of my first stability related jobs. We didn't know anything about WVTRs and we didn't have internet or Google. So we were trying to figure out how to tell if certain packages were letting more fumes in than others. And we decided to use garlic oil as a test and basically to do an odor test. But it worked absolutely too well, and everything in the chamber smelled like garlic instead of just our small test subject. So it was just a little bit of a funny thing. Another very interesting fact to go along with that topic, I was just going to share in the chats here is WVTRs. See if that works. I just took this off of where did I get polyprint.com. Just a quick list that they had of various plastics. BOPP is by oriented polypropylene. HDP is the more common one that we're aware of. That's good news, is HDP is actually quite good moisture barrier compared to LDPE. I was really surprised that EVOH performed so poorly. Actually, there's a large 22 to 124 there. The difference between those is apparently due to the amount of ethylene. So EV stands, I can't remember what the V stands for, but ethylene, vinyl alcohol, I think it is. So just a quick little trivia piece, WVTRs versus various types of plastic. With that, we wanted to have a little time for questions here. We haven't seen any questions posted. If you have a question specifically you would like to ask, you can post it via the chat. Otherwise, we have several questions lined up to enter. And I think for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and start with one question. In fact, I'll try to post that on the chat as well, just for everybody to be able to see it. Just a question on inventory, and the question of the inventories are accurate. They're all checked and verified, but in this particular case, the person found several bins were placed in the wrong storage, placed in the correct storage condition, but in the wrong location. So it was in a different chamber. So what type of documentation would you recommend for this incident, or was it even an incident at all? Anyone have thoughts on that? Maybe Parsa, your area of limbs, or anyone?
Yes, thank you. Well, we always have to start with an incident report, and then do the kappa of what is the risk with this misplacement. So the standard operating procedures should govern that what we're going to do. As you know, something has happened, we put it in a wrong location, but however is the same storage condition. So the integrity of the stability has not been jeopardized. The only thing we do, if you have a computer system like a stability management system, well, you just transfer location from one place to another. If you have manual system, you have to write, again, some sort of a change control and move from one chamber to another so that you correctly identify the location of this product. So I think at this, the risk is low because it's exactly the same condition. It was just a low, it's a wrong location.
Thank you. We also had some experience with that from what to do internally when there's a mix-up of that. Part of the evaluation was how long did it spend in there, and is it probably is anything longer than an hour or two, depending on which chamber it got to be. Was you're done with those samples, you might want to send them on for some kind of quarantine until you decide exactly what you're done with. But we've had that happen a number of times, and one of the ways that we avoided it was to color code the bins that we're putting into. So if we had, let's say, a label that was blue and we put it into the wrong chamber, the chamber contained labels that were all yellow. As soon as you laid it on the shelf, you would know exactly that you've got one that didn't match, and you would need to take it out again right away. So one of the ways to overcome that. But yeah, I think it is significant, as Parsa mentioned, if documentation is everything in that.
If I may, not to toot our horn as a software, but digital processes avoid a lot of these mishaps because the computer system govern where the sample will go, and you just follow the process. I strongly believe digital processes will assist, but so that also a recommendation. Computer system have assisted many colleagues in this type of management.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then a fun stability fact: the Pharmaceutical Stability Discussion Group was formed in what year would you guess? This is not a poll question, so you can't write this down unless it's on your desk. But just put it in your head. We've actually been around since 1988, so celebrating well over 30 some odd years here. Before I interview Chris, I know, Amy, you have to go within the first hour. Was your poll associated with any particular topic for the subject matter experts that we would time it to them, or we could ask it in general? Okay, I'm going to ask you to unmute and tell us what that poll question is after I interview Chris. So, Chris Latos, welcome to the podium, to the top of the reviewing stand for the Stability Day Parade.
Oh, thanks, John.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do for your company and some of the challenges that you face within the area of combination products with stability?
Yeah, so Hollister is a medical device manufacturer. My expertise in combination products has been in some kind of side projects. But I manage our stability function here, so that it's a small group. We've got 2 technicians and a stability scientist. We work closely with regulatory for new submissions, both with FDA as well as foreign notified bodies. Work with our transportation distribution group for recommended storage temperatures, as well as how to handle excursions when they have them. We write, stability reports, protocols, and also justifications for not doing stability in some cases. Probably some of our biggest challenges lie, unlike drug stability, where you have pretty defined, tests as far as assay impurities. Medical device is sometimes it can be difficult to determine what indeed is a stability indicating test for a new device. And then you also have to have a fine, balance a fine line of performing too little or too much testing that doesn't add value. Our medical devices are really a combination of polymeric components, adhesives. We have films that are heat sealed and things like that. So, a lot of the testing that we do really is in the realm of more of the physical attributes of the product as opposed to chemical attributes. So yeah, that's kind of my role here at Hollister. A bit of an anomaly. I've been with the company almost 32 years now, so it's more than half my life.
Wow.
And in your next 32 years, where do you see stability going within the realm of combination products?
Yeah, so with combination products, you're seeing more and more out in the market, and I think you just see an increase in combination products over the years because I think everybody's probably familiar with a combination product, but like a combination drug device product is a medical device that also has a drug constituent part. So these offer more therapeutic benefits than just a device alone or a drug alone. So drug-eluting stents and things like that. But I think in the future you'll see more and more drug device combination products.
That's funny.
Thank you.
My first thought when he asked you that was AI. I was like, oh, he's going to say AI in 32 years. But as a little plug, though, just want to give a little heads up. In the next 2 months or so, we're probably going to have AI as a major topic in the newsletter. Just kind of brainstorming of ways that AI might influence future stability. Just thought I'd plug that in. Thanks.
And that's kind of self-fulfilling. If we do brainstorming, all I have to do is ask AI.
That's true.
Okay, before we ask Amy what her question was, we're gonna recognize that Denise Rin was going to say 1988 for the founding year. So she's the winner of the prize that we get to be determined and what that might be. So Amy, can you tell us what your poll question was? Oh, you're still muted somehow, even though my screen doesn't say that you are.
That's very strange.
There you go.
There you're on.
Okay. I was thinking I think I unmuted. Okay, I'm glad you can hear me. So my question is, essentially for ICH, Q1, how do you calculate the 5% change in the assay from its initial value? So let's just say, for example, your assay should be between 90 and 110, 90.0 and 110.0, right? So then if your initial is, say, if your T0 is 95.0%, do you calculate your 5% change based on an absolute difference, based on a 5% absolute difference from 95.0, that is 95.0 plus or minus 5.0, or B, do you calculate the 5% of 95%, and then you add that to the 95%. So 95% 5% of 95% is actually 4.75, not 5.0. So would your 5% be 95.0 plus or minus 4.75?
Okay, so assuming that most people follow that, we don't have the quick time to do an official poll question that shows up on the screen, but we can do it with a show of hands. First, let me ask if you're ready to hover over the reactions part where you can raise your hand. Find that first at the bottom of your screen. And then I would ask how many people listening can answer Amy's question. And then raise your hand if you can. So far, Amy, it sounds like you're unique. Oh, we got one. Others? I know my struggle is to find how to raise my hand, but as a host, I can raise mine. Or maybe I can.
Okay.
Okay, any others? Two. Give you just another second here to keep going.
Okay.
I don't
Okay,
know.
so it could be coming down to a 50-50. All right, so two of the group can raise their hand. And let's see, John Stewart, I think you were the other one, if you want to unmute. Oh, he's got his chat answer. Absolutely, as long as the assay is based on a target of 100%. And then Walter.
Yeah, we'd always based it on the absolute percentage value, although that doesn't make much sense if you're dealing with smaller. 25 to 20 is a pretty huge drop, but
So with a poll of two people, 100% of the industry is joining that particular answer, which is why we're always careful to give a baseline as to where you might be able to go with these things. Okay.
Prior to, I have a follow-up question. Prior to my asking, have you heard of the other alternative? So did you know of the both alternatives and you picked one, or you just went with the absolute?
I've not actually heard the question. I can only admit that I wondered how it could be absolute, and that's what we practiced, but how we could do absolute when in some cases that would be a considerable change over time. But no, I've not heard of anyone doing that other way. I'm not saying it's not done, it's just I hadn't heard of it.
Okay, so it looks like that's as far as we can take you for today, Amy, although if we can put your question up on Stability Hub and let the rest of the world see it, we
Yeah.
might get more answers as well.
That
And that's
sounds
the purpose of that discussion, although it is much more fun to look at somebody and talk with them when they're asking their question and us giving our answers. Okay. Past the top of the hour, so I'd like to welcome those who joined us in the last half hour. And glad that you could join us. And we were celebrating Stability Day based on Arrhenius's birthday, and also taking questions. So if you have questions you'd like to submit via chat, we're welcome to entertain those. We're going to give Walter a chance to tell us another story and then ask one of the questions that we have.
Okay, well, real quick story is just I thought of this story since we're going to be talking to Emily, our QA person, in a bit. The experience we had once of some auditors, we had a really horrible situation where 3 FDA auditors were in our chambers all at the same time. And they were controlled drug areas, so we had to have 2 people following each person. And in this particular case, they had seen some chatter online about leaking, and they clearly came to us specifically looking to see how we were handling potential leaks on Stability. And so they actually took some of our very volatile sample some material that was a volatile drug, and weighed the bottles. They used our balance, weighed the bottles right in front of us just to see if any of them had leaked without our recording them or knowing. It was a very interesting, stressful situation that worked out just fine, but to have them perform an experiment right there in front of you on your equipment, and you don't know how it's going to turn. I mean, we shouldn't be leaking, but it was a very interesting experience. With that, we just have a question, another question related to the quality and such. Unless we have any, let me check real quick to see if anything's been submitted. Nothing's submitted. So, sorry, my question here is, what should the stability group do to optimize the interface with QA when it comes to improving stability, function, quality, and compliance? Rather broad question. So what should the stability group do to optimize the interface with QA when it comes to improving stability, function, quality, and compliance?
I think since we have Emily with us, we could ask her that question first, but maybe Emily, I could do it in the context of the interview because that's up next on my agenda. So as you're thinking about how to answer that question and talking at the same time, because I know women can multitask better than men, can you tell us briefly about your role in stability and some of the biggest challenges you face and the future of quality and stability?
Absolutely. First, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Happy Stability Day. It's nice that we get to celebrate this. So just a little bit of background. I actually started my career in doing stability, and then I moved over to the dark side. So I moved over to QA. So right now, I work for a contract research organization, and with regards to stability, I'm no longer on the studies. I'm now taking all of that information that we've gathered through doing those clinical studies on the stability product and making sure that our clinical sites are following what they're supposed to be doing. So my focus now is helping with supply chain to make sure that the IP is being shipped appropriately, and then dealing with any kind of excursions that we have at the clinical sites or any kind of product issues. So the work that you're doing on the testing side is getting to see that full circle has been eye-opening for me, because we think it's second nature to store something that's supposed to be refrigerated in a refrigerator, but you'd be surprised how many people don't actually do that once it gets into the patient's hands. So I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen so far is really getting patients and practitioners to understand how the studies that we do, whether it's an in-use study or a functional study, if it's a combination product, or even just something as simple as storing the product itself, it's really critical. And it's those instructions are listed on the packaging for a reason. It's not just we want you to store it that way because we said so, but it's there's a good science behind it. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges I face now, is making sure that our clinical sites are actually following what they're supposed to be doing with regards to the product storage and the handling. So
great. Anything looking forward towards the future that you see coming or would like to see coming?
I guess with regards to, because we're doing these studies so that we can support how our product is going to be shipped and handled and put into the patient's hands. I think that one of the things that would be really nice is, working in the clinical side, we have to write our informed consent forms to an 8th grade reading level. So I think if we could kind of figure out a way to put all of that science with regards to storage and handling at that kind of a reading level would be really helpful in achieving compliance on the patient end.
Great. And then getting to the question that Walter framed for us, what is it that you and as a QA person would like to see the average stability group folks do to improve the quality and the interaction with QA and overall quality for the stability area?
So I would say that going back to when I was running a stability program, I always looked at QA as like the police, so if I do something wrong, they're going to come down and smack my hand. In my career, I've been trying to shift that thinking where QA is not the police. We are there to help you and support you and make sure that you've got the resources that you need to make the right decision. So um, I think one of the biggest things that stability groups and stability personnel can actually do is have a very open two-way communication street with your QA group. They're not there to tell you that you're bad children. They're there to help you and problem solve and be like a second set of eyes on an issue if you've got something going on. And involving them from the very beginning when you have a problem really helps resolve that problem faster and avoid any other I hate to be cliche, but mountains that become or molehills that become mountains. So addressing problems up front and having that open communication, it's really, really important.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll open the next part by telling a stability trivia question. And that was when people thought that the first photo stability chamber might have been invented. And no, it wasn't Ben Franklin, although we want to credit him for everything in science. But and correct me if I'm wrong, because he might have snuck one in there when I wasn't looking. But take a wild guess as to when that would be. And I actually don't have the correct answer, the precise answer, but I do remember when I started my career that around 1975 or so, when I was a couple of years in, we purchased a light cabinet from Leon Lockman. If anyone's ever heard that name, I was surprised to find several years back that Leon Lockman showed up in a seminar I was at, and I assumed he was long since dead. But he's the president of Leon Lockman Associates and running a consulting firm. And I had purchased his light cabinet, which is just a couple of fluorescent bulbs placed in the top and mirrored sides and those kind of things. And then the trivia of the stability story was, and you might identify with this, it had to do with stability chambers and safety. Was closing up the area one night before I went home and just went final round of looking at the chambers and make sure they're all still running within specifications. We didn't have an automated monitoring system. We had the circular charts going round and round. And I caught just a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye. And I turned back and looked at the chamber, didn't see anything wrong. And as I was ready to turn away, I saw yet another flash of movement. But then I gave it my full attention and still saw nothing. But I walked over to the chamber, and then all of a sudden what I noticed was that somebody's face appeared for a split second and then disappeared. And it was our stability assistant, who was all of about 4'7" and weighed maybe 95 pounds. And she could not activate the emergency exit knob on the chamber, and she was trapped in there, would have spent the night, except for her jumping up and down and spotting me when I was ready to turn off the lights. So these days, I think it's much easier to get out of a stability chamber, but you might want to test that and take the lightest person and the shortest person you can find, have them see if they could get out of your stability chamber. So that's the weird story from the world of stability macabre. Okay, Walter, it's time for a question.
I'm gonna calm my heart. Still struggling with that one. That's difficult for a claustrophobic. Okay, so the next question we've got is related to inventory, or sorry, not inventory, to requalification. So I thought before we ask the question, we could run the poll we have related to that, if you don't mind, John. I'll just go ahead and put it up.
Okay.
Regarding the frequency, your required frequencies for requalification of your chambers.
There we go. So this question comes up as a discussion question all the time in PSTG meetings. There's some guidances, and sometimes the guidances have changed over the years. And then we go to a PSTG meeting and we learn what everybody else does. We run back home and we change our practice. So I know I've changed mine twice over the years.
Cool.
We have 10 out of 22 responding, and in some cases it might be that people don't know, and that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay. Well, I'll leave that up for a few more seconds. The corresponding question that we've got, and again, just to confirm, we don't have any others posted on the chat. So if just to feel free, if you've got a question that you want to post on the chat, we'd be happy to field it. But the one we have right now is the guidances seem to give some leeway to the frequency of chamber requalification. So does the ISPE recommend a particular interval, or is there guidance for establishing a qualification policy? With that, I might as well open it up, especially to Dean as our resident chamber expert here.
Yeah, I'll interview
Sure.
Dean. But just to review the answers here for those who can't see
Oh,
them.
right.
Our choice number 1 got 42% less than every 2 years. It'd be interesting to see why they do that, whether they picked up off an old guidance or they just think that's prudent, or if it's a lot of them are doing like 6 months to 12 months. There was only 8% or 1% every 2 years, and that's a former guidance answer. Every 3 years got not a single one, and that traditionally is the most popular one in PSDG circles. Choice 4 was the same as our choice 1, which was less than every 2 years. The choice 4 was whenever a significant change occurs, that's 42%. So that's just as popular as setting it in motion. And choice number 5, no established schedule. So you would probably want to take a look at that if somebody's coming to inspect you. So that's the whole range. So with that, Dean, you can tell us a little bit more about your role at EGC and your experience, and then your biggest challenge in the field of expertise and projections for what's going on in the future. So we'll give you the floor.
Great. Well, thanks. Happy to be here, and happy Stability Day to everybody. And haven't partook in any activities with PSTG for about a year, so this is really nice. So I'm retired from Eli Lilly and Company after about 28 years, and held a stability role as an asset manager in the GMP applications for both stability reference standards and things like that. Left Lilly, went to another company that sold freezers, and acted as a SME and a consultant there for GMP activities and applications. And now with environmental growth chambers, they build everything from plant growth chambers to GMP chambers. So I help consult on those matters in the design phase and then through the building process. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been up to. To answer the question, so the biggest challenge, this actually, it kind of segues into the biggest challenge. I'll answer the question. ISPE, or the International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineering, they have a guide out there, and in their guide, they have a chapter that focuses on periodic evaluation and frequency of thermal mapping studies. And so to answer the question, they don't tell you the answer, but they run you through quite a few risk-based options and questions to ask yourself. I was so happy to hear Emily talk just a few minutes ago and touch on this, because this is one of those conversations that definitely needs to happen with your quality unit to help decide not only the risk of the product, but to talk about the regulations and things. So it's always better to talk to your quality group ahead of time. So hopefully that'll help folks, at least guide them to a place where they can look at some of the considerations of risk when they come up to answer the question of how often do you requalify your chamber. I would say currently the biggest challenge that we have today is, and it's actually an old challenge, and it gets better, and it's kind of ebbs and flows, but sometimes the customer doesn't know what kind of chamber they want. And what I mean by this is you need to really identify what your chamber needs to do as far as temperature, what it needs to do to pass the test that should be predetermined. You should be purchasing it, your storage location or your storage unit based on what you need. So knowing what your test acceptance criteria is important. So a lot of times in the roles that I've had to ask the customer, and I would pull from what we would call discovery questions. How big is how much storage space do you need? How much or what temperature or temperatures do you need? Are you going to test it? If you are going to test it, can you please share your protocol or at least let us see where you're going to put the probes, because that might help us design the chamber that you need to pass. A nightmare story I had to be at the beginning of my career, I was handed an 8-chamber facility that was in the process of being built. So I had no input on the design or anything like that. And then I went to test it and they all failed. It took about 3 months to figure out that we didn't tell the manufacturer of the chambers to build it to meet the specs of the test. Luckily, the manufacturer was good enough and built them robust enough that it passed. So I would say the biggest challenge is you really need to make sure, no matter who is building your chamber or who you're purchasing your storage space from, understands how you're going to test it, and make sure you got your quality unit involved. So let's see, projections for the future. Right now, I'm working with colleagues at Environmental Growth Chambers to try to tailor a little bit at least the GMP side of the bidding process, trying to get the customers to give us the information that we need to build or design their chamber. What we're finding now is, in order to save money, a lot of folks they're going to build one chamber. Let's say it's a 900 square foot room, but they want it to do anything from 25 degrees C at 30% humidity all the way up to 40 degrees C at 60% or 75% humidity. And sometimes they want it to go down to 5 degrees. So to add to that, we're also finding out that folks are, instead of building 2 or 3 chambers for backups, they're actually ordering redundant systems. So if one system fails, the other system takes over, and you don't have to move the samples. So what we're trying to do is trying to help the customer understand what questions we have that need to be answered before we can build the chamber. And you'd be surprised, just like me when I first started out in the 90s, if you would have asked me, well, what's the test criteria? I had no idea. And as the months went by, then I met my quality person. And then they said, oh, did you know it has to pass plus or minus 2 degrees C? It's like, oh, how hard can that be? So anyway, we're just working with third-party contractors and the customer to try to develop a way where that whole what do I need, those discovery questions are answered in full at the very start of the process.
Thank you, Dean. A couple of housekeeping things as we move into the next segments here. Some people had to drop off, others are joining us. I know, Amy, you need to go at some point soon. Did we get all your questions, or did we leave you hanging on the second one?
No, I do have a second question, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I was just wondering, if you have a commercial product that, say, has 2 years shelf life, and the stability of it, the stability study for that commercial product was initiated, within a month of the date of manufacture. Would you, when you do the stability study and you test your endpoint, let's just say your 24-month time point, would you test it at 24 months from the date that you introduce the samples into the chamber? 24 months from that, or would you test it on the expiry date?
That's a great question, and we can certainly open it up to others. I'm thinking lots of times that if you've got that on stability within 30 days, some companies have a policy that says that's basically close to your date of manufacturing. Other ones would take either 30 days or another time and say, if you go on beyond that, we'll test from the date of manufacturing at the end of our study. And then they would also put in another time point to make sure it was after that, which would be corresponding to the date on stability in the chamber. But that's just my voice. So anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, we use the date samples go in the chamber, but I think the most important thing is to have your SOP and have that defined in there and don't deviate from SOP.
Yeah, and more importantly, I think in this case, it colors it a bit because it was the commercial batch as opposed to an R&D batch. It sometimes gets its own SOPs for things and could be pretty exotic for shipping product around the world for packaging, sterility, that kind of thing. So we hate to use the words "it depends," but it's one of those cases where it depends.
One other thing to consider is your stability commitment. The wording in there might hint that it will. Well, in our case, for example, it said at the top of the protocol, it said months at the stability condition, which required us then to meet that 24 months within that condition. And therefore, we did have to test it separately at the expiration date. Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I was pretty much done. I was thinking that it's a question that comes up often, and I'm not sure there's a textbook answer for that because of all the policies and interpretations you can do. And in a perfect world, you would manufacture and certainly have it on stability within less than 30 days. But in reality, especially for large companies, you're shipping it all around the world or across the U.S. to get a package or to do sterilization or an overpackage, those kind of things. And then the time just keeps creeping up. So the big thing is to have justification for what you're doing. So there's a lot of right answers as long as you have scientific justification. That you can make your case that it's covered by stability. That would be great. Okay, well, thank you for asking that, Amy. You are just a perfect model for how somebody behaves in a PSDG meeting. So thank you for joining us today and keep your questions coming. Time for another trivia story. Well, trivia and a story. The story is a holiday monitoring conundrum. Worked for a large company, and they had a shutdown at Christmas time, and that was the perfect time for all the HVAC people to come in and the engineers and the people who are checking things. And they just needed to do a whole series of calibrations, and they were also checking whether or not the alarm system was working. So they did that check first. It was working, and then they turned it off so it would not annoy them while they went through all the chambers and put them through their paces. And then they went home for Christmas. They did not turn on the alarm system again after that, nor any data monitoring for that matter. And so for a whole month afterwards, and I was not in charge of those chambers, by the way, just a little disclaimer. A whole month later, it was discovered that no data was coming through. And that's when they decided that I should be responsible for coming up with an answer as to what happened and why it was okay to do that. So the story is never turn off an alarm without an alarm to tell you that your alarm is not on or your monitoring system. Anytime you have a loss of data, it should be flagging someplace in a monitoring system and saying, hey, you got no data, go and fix this. So that's my story for that.
Those barbarians.
Let's see, trivia. Oh, I want to recognize John Stewart, who guessed 1960 that there was a light chamber out there. And I'm going to credit you with knowing that, John, because you might be almost as old as me. So we'll see. When was the start of ICH? And you give us, think of a year in your head, and we'll just kind of determine whether or not we can detect that. You might put it up in the comments if you want to. But at any rate, what year do you think ICH was started? And also I'm looking at chat, we're just getting into a response from Jen, who has talked about always retrieve the commercial products at the expiration date. So thank you for that input, and farewell to Amy. The year was 1990. And for extra credit, who was the stabilitarian interested guy, or maybe a stability stakeholder that hijacked a meeting in order to try and get that whole movement started? It was in Germany, so we'll give you the hint. He has something in common with Mozart. And because your brains work really fast, we'll not expect you to come up with that by looking it up on the internet. We'll get to that before you do. It was Wolfgang Grimm. So he was the one who was really interested in international harmonization, and he kind of sponsored that, and then it went on its own accord after that. And Wolfgang Grimm, by the way, managed to attend a PSDG meeting at one point in time, simply because he was part of Boehringer Ingelheim, and they hosted a meeting. He happened to be there, so he came in, sat down, and it was one of the biggest moments of my career to be near that kind of a celebrity in the stability realm. Okay, moving on. We are going to wax statistical and interview Laura Pack in just a moment. But before that, let's do some polls and go to our first statistics poll of the day. And I'm going to launch that so you can see it. And then the question is, how do you do statistics? First one's real-time evaluation internally through your LIMS. Or do you export to a dedicated stability one? That's kind of like a LIMS, but it's not part of a LIMS. It's separate for that. And choice number 3, export it to a third party, which could be a statistics group in your company or somebody on the outside that you're contracting. Give you just another second for that. While that's going on, if you just joined us, we're celebrating Stability Day with some stability trivia, stories, answering your questions, and interviewing subject matter experts across the range of the disciplines that go into stability. So welcome. Okay, we got 11 responses, and the majority, 55%, is the real-time evaluation internally through a program like LIMS. The next one is 36% through evaluation exported to a dedicated stability analysis package. And the last one, export the data to a third party. So that's the order in which those go. And Laura, we have a second one in order to find out even more before we interview. And there was a comment?
I was just saying that was very interesting. Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we know you're all bright and energetic people, so we will launch the last poll of the day. Everybody see that one about statisticians? Who does your statistical work? Choice 1, a novice in your group, somebody not trained in that, but they might be good at statistics. Number 2, a professional statistician assigned to analyze specifically for stability, so they're trained in stability. Number 3 is a professional statistician that's randomly assigned. So you might have a large department, and whenever a stability question goes up, they say, hey, here's another one. Who's going to take this? It could be anybody. And number 4, no established process.
Interesting again.
Okay, 1/3 of the group so far. is choice A, have somebody within their group do it, and that's fine. Number two, choice two, a professional assigned to analyze it. 11% or just 1 out of 9. And 3 is a professional statistician within the company or contracted, but kind of randomly picking your stability data analysis out with all the rest of the things going on in the company. And choice number 4, no established process, is 1/3. So that is interesting. Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing that. And then we'll move over to chat with Laura. So welcome, Laura.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me today.
We're glad to have you. You are amongst the queens of stability for the royalty in our stability family. So we thank you for celebrating Stability Day with us. And we'd ask those kind of questions about how you serve the role of stability in your company, some big challenges, and where you see us going in the future, if you would.
Well, so I actually have just started a new job. So I'm finishing up my second week at Moderna. We formed a new CMC quantitative science group. So my role is now stability analysis, all stats analysis in CMC, which is going to include stability. And this was a mini part question, John. My role, I guess my role now as head of this group is going to be to set our standard practice, right? How do we do this 80% of the time, and then advise on what do we do the 20% of the time that things are not as we expect. Challenges, is that the next part of this question?
Yes.
Yes. I think that, you know, let's start with opportunities. The opportunities as we go forward are that we have a lot more computing power, and more awareness, I guess, in the industry that there are, that we have power to analyze our data. There's a move towards this accelerated stability modeling. We have revolution at ICH where Q1A or Q1, including Q1E, will be revised hopefully to incorporate some more sophisticated, modernized statistical methods to look at our data. And challenges then, of course, are going to be implementing these and broadly educating our non-statisticians so that we can all access this way to interpret our data. I started my career as a stabilitarian and became a statistician because I wanted to learn how to apply math to my stability data. But I have also then spent a lot of my career, as you know, trying to teach stabilitarians that you don't have to be a statistician to do your job well. So I think that's an opportunity and a challenge for us to continue to partner together so that you can do your job as a stabilitarian, understand your data, and leverage statistics without having to be a statistician.
Okay, and then looking forward to the future, trends you might see in that, will AI, have AI hired you for your next job to take over the entire process entirely and relieve us humans of doing it?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I do see there are opportunities to automate some things, right? But I don't want to, I'm always trying to be the voice of pragmatism there. You can't proceduralize think, and we don't want to automate, we don't want to automate analyses to the point where you're just saying, yep, green light, red light, pass, fail, without really seeing whether the model follows the data, checking our assumptions, and continuing to as scientists, continuing to look at the data and make sure that the math makes sense. So AI, yes, as a productivity tool, yes, as a helper, not as a replacement.
Good to know that we all still have jobs for a while. Thank you for those comments. And we'll ask you to join in on any questions that come up in the future, anything related to your area of expertise. And speaking of expertise, you prompted a thought that I have that might direct towards Parsa. And that's a question about if we're capturing data that we're going to look at and analyze, what happens when a major system like LIMS either is interrupted through maybe some natural causes, something goes down in the system, or maybe by Mother Nature coming up and taking away all the power supply or even blowing out the roof of the building, so that our data gathering stops as well as the processing. Do you have any recommendations on how people should be backing things up and recovering from those kind of incidents?
Thank you, John. Yes, there are a number of ways to ensure that this is part of your disaster recovery or business continuity. I mean, you mentioned more and more dire situations, so it's really depending on if it's a little just electrical problem for half an hour versus the roof going off the building for whatever reason, that this may be weeks or months of disaster. So depending, you should have procedural places for both backup and recovery and disaster recovery. As you know, nowadays you can do your backups either on the media or on the cloud. So there are different options available for colleagues to ensure that their data is safe. If you are on the your own on-premise system, we highly recommend that you have both backup in your organization and another backup outside the organization. That can be a media or it can be on cloud, but whatever you choose, it will be away from that disaster, quote unquote, area. So that if you want to restore that information, you have an opportunity to do that. The cloud itself has redundancies, but again, you can have redundancy in your on-premise system. So there are many ways to do that, but it's highly recommended, or actually a must these days, that you have the data backup and the means to store it. Now, and the frequency of this restoring of the data has to be established by your IT colleagues. And the reason for that, you cannot go for long and they say there was something wrong with this backup, that you can recover the data that you're looking for, and for whatever reason there was something wrong. So there should be established procedures that at certain amount of time there will be a recovery process to ensure that the data is okay. And there can be hot backup or cold backup. That means the backup while you're running the system or while the system is not being used. So there are different ways. I'm sure that your IT colleagues can assist you with those processes, but these are all the options, but it's a must to do for backup and recovery.
Great, thank you. We'll go back over to Walter for the next segment.
Okay. Well, it just had a little interesting story for myself. I was going into a 4075 chamber to organize some samples. This was during the middle of a day and middle of the week. I was dressed, this is before all the casual clothing stuff. I had my long sleeves on and a undershirt and everything. I got in there I ended up in there for about 10 minutes. It was a long time and I was just absolutely drenched. I mean, my shirt was totally drenched. I had no choice, but I went into a side room, took everything off, wrung out everything, rinsed my shirt and water and put it back on. And I mean, I couldn't go to the office, back to the office that way, but I hung out there until it was reasonably dry and then went back to my desk. But it was a very, very damp situation. You probably, I don't know if you've got a walk-in 4075, you know what I'm talking about. But speaking of that, a little interesting trivia too is the fact that the absolute humidity, the water content in the air, like water concentration in the air at 4075 turns out to be 3 times the water concentration of the air at 2560. You can pull this up in a lot of humidity, relative humidity versus absolute humidity charts out there. And then interestingly enough, then 3075, the intermediate condition, is about twice the amount of moisture, water vapor in the air compared to the 2560. So it's not, still relative, and relative does make a difference. But the fact that the actual water molecules in the air, the concentration of water in the air, is 3 times that of 2560, and 3075 is 2 times. I thought very interesting. I don't think they did that on purpose, but just a little trivia. So let's see, we're going to move on to questions, or unless we're doing, well, we're actually right on time. John, you want to ask a question, or do you want to continue with the interview? Or actually, no, you were going to talk about upcoming events.
Yeah, that was the last interview, and I could do upcoming events, then we can entertain any other questions about stability. So just what's going on with PSDG and Stability Hub. For those of you who are new to and just kind of found Stability Hub online, it's founded by PSDG, which we've been around for however many years. The trivia question said, I think 1988, and done live meetings, and people found that valuable and had a lot of participation by vendors as well. We've been a little bit light on presentations and more on sharing experiences and asking questions, conducting polls, that kind of thing. So Stability Hub came along about 4 or 5 years ago, where I was slowing down in the industry, but I wanted to have a source where people could turn to find out about regulations and publications, organizations that might be helpful, where they could find a supplier for stability, and have a discussion forum. So that's what we've been about. And recently Walter joined me about a year ago now, I think. Time flies when we're having fun, because this is the second time we've done this. And just making ourselves available for that. And PSDG was doing live meetings right up through 2019, and then the pandemic came along, and we did a pretty successful one online. But we all miss getting together and seeing each other face to face. So when that opportunity came back, we decided that we would try and do a joint program with Kennex, which is a seminar company that produces a lot of meetings, and took a lot of burden off of us for arranging hotels and activities and those kind of things. So for the past few years, we've been joined with them, and they do primarily presentations, but they've given us some discussion time. But now we're thinking about the possibility of getting back together, doing live face-to-face, or maybe some modifications thereof. We almost came out with a poll on that, but we decided we needed a little bit more details to be able to explain it. So we're going to put it in the next Stability Hub newsletter and find out what level of interest there might be for people getting together. It's one thing also for have your interest, but it's another one to walk in your manager's office and say, I want to spend X number of dollars and go to a meeting that doesn't have any presenters and doesn't have anything on its agenda, which has been our biggest bugaboo over the years, because the agenda is actually set by you when you walk in with a stability question. To solve that management problem, we started our meetings on Sunday afternoons, and we had 3 presentations by our vendors. And amazingly, that got everybody to get their manager's approval, and which set the way for the next 2 days that we could sit together and raise questions and take polls and find out how the other guy does it. And that's been a pretty successful platform. It's also been a great place for our vendors on Sunday night to come in and do face-to-face discussion with exactly the kind of people that would be buying their services and products. So we're looking to see if it's time to bring that back, or if we want to just continue on either meeting through the Kennex meetings, where it's time is much more limited, or to maybe meet in the middle someplace and do some kind of online meeting like this, only a little bit more centered towards the questions and a little bit less towards the trivia part. So watch for a poll coming out in Stability Hub newsletter in March to do that. We also have some other things up our sleeve. We're looking towards this format to see how much interest there might be. Even knocked around the idea, maybe once a month, get together for an hour, and anybody could call in with their stability questions, talk to each other, maybe some subject matter experts, and fulfill some of the questions that they have that way, linking each other together so that they can solve problems. And one of the dreams I had is I look over my shoulder and I see the regulatory people in wraps. And they've got their act together and they do their own accreditation. They put on meetings. I don't necessarily want to grow to that extent, but I would very much like to be able to put things together that we could accredit stabilitarians. Somebody passes that exam and wants to move around from company to company, and you're looking for somebody to hire. If they have that accreditation, that would be great. But we don't have any way to evaluate people's knowledge about stability right now. But we're thinking that might be something we might like to look into. So that's what's up our sleeve. The next PSDG gathering is going to be in the context of Kennex in Philadelphia, June 4th through 6th, I believe. So you can watch for things like that. Lots of us are online from time to time doing seminars for various companies or events. I saw Dean just last week do a really great one on validating stability chambers. So keep an eye out for that. And I did mention that as part of Stability Hub, but we do have an events section you can go to and see what's coming up and along the lines of stability or closely related things at any point in time. If you're representing organizations that supply stability, we've not gotten around to it yet, but we're going to make an appeal based on the popularity of the site, the number of hits we get, and the number of people subscribed to the newsletter, that we'd be welcoming sponsors and advertising. And that might defray some of the costs of putting the site on, and also give us some opportunities to join apps as an organization, maybe go out and attend a meeting in order to bring stability information back and make it available to everyone. So that's what's up with us. Let's go back over to Walter for a story or another couple of questions. And we've got about 9 minutes left.
Yeah, well, I'll spare people with the stories and try to post a question. There's a few interesting ones, but again, if you have something you came wanting to ask, feel free to put it on the chat and we'll try to post it out here. But the question I've got right now is, and here I'll send it in the chat as at the same time I read it, is instead of destroying remaining material from many of our studies, R&D groups have requested the remaining samples for various testing they perform. We've historically happily helped them. What are the GMP risks of this practice and how can they be remediated, if there are any risks? So, oh, okay.
This happened to me. And I'll gladly welcome all other comments. We had an FDA inspection, and this process has been in place ever since I started working. Everybody wants to use the samples that have been exposed for a long period of time. What kind of degradation is already underway that various groups for extractables and leachables and all kinds of development analytical groups are always asking for stability samples coming off of 4075 or the freezer. And we've always given them to them. And I saw little harm in that practice, but an FDA person came through an inspection relatively recently, and they looked at that practice and they said, how are you ever going to control whether or not those assay results that happen way down the hall by people not in your group from coming back into the stability program and becoming answers? And I'm thinking, why would you want to do that? Those samples are the oldest ones we got with the most degradation. Why would we ever use it? But that argument didn't fly. So we were given, I don't know if it ended up in a 483 or just a kind of a stern look from them. And suddenly we had to cut off all those groups that were relying on the stability samples and try to come up with, well, do they get their own chambers? Is there a way to alter the sample somehow that we change the name of it or the identity of it so it could never be confused? All those things came into play. So there were some GMP aspects to it. So I'll use that as a preference for anybody else who wants to comment. We just killed off all the other commentary, didn't I?
You can unmute yourself if you.
If I may tell you the story, I used to work in pharma before, and sometimes over-the-counter medication that is like not prescription. They would ask us when we were running the study. At the end, there were some samples left. They said, "Can we have it just to use in our home, like a polysporin or some, over-the-counter ointment and whatever?" So sometimes we would ask the corporation if it's possible to give that away. Sometimes they would accept, sometimes they will. It's not the GMP, but we have to make sure that they're not prescription if they're being used for whatever reason, except the testing. I just wanted to let you know, sometimes we would get the request, just can we have these samples now that nobody needs it and they use it. So we would ask the corporation and do that. I just thought another point of view about this question.
Mhm.
Anyone else have any experience with that?
We could do a quick show of hands. People that follow that practice, they make their stability samples available to other groups once they come off of a protocol.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Just put a hand up in your response.
Yeah, so if you do make your samples available, please raise your hand.
Let's see. Right.
And I'll raise my hand because I do make my did make my samples available. Okay, looks like we have 6 or so. Great,
Yeah.
that's good. I mean, of those 6, you know, do you have a way to mitigate risk in that, or are you free to share? It'd be great to hear from someone. Okay, no problem. I will say we did and allow that, and we had a procedure that just simply required the studies had to be completed and all the testing completed and verified before we could give samples away. We would also insist that they take everything, so we didn't have to throw any half portions away. But that was just our thing. But we, you know, we listening to John, I realized there might have been more risk at that than we realized. But that was our practice.
Yeah, I think it's hard to substitute for that. There, unless you do put another program in with separate samples, separate identifications, that kind of thing. I was trying to think of how we could do something to the sample so it would definitely change the course of the lifetime of the sample from the stability program, but all of it involves some kind of destruction. But I was thinking you could also do something and reissue it under a different study number, different kind of identification of sorts. The idea would be to offer some kind of justification for your program and cite whatever safeguards you come up with, just to be prepared to answer that kind of question. We were totally unprepared, not expecting that to happen at all. I wasn't sure if the people that didn't raise their hand, if they weren't quite sure about that, or they all stopped doing it for a cause. But it's interesting to think about. So if you are doing it, then start to think about some justifications that
Sure.
this is not going to work its way back into the system through the data that's generated.
Yeah, we did get 2 replies in the chat. One referring to a form where they transfer ownership, which that's interesting. A formal, it's no longer ours and no longer our responsibility type form. Which then that covered where John came of, is there a way that you somehow mark it or prevent that it could be confused or ever get confused with a stability sample? Then also there was this company that's a CDMO, so their clients material has to be returned to the client, which is a very good point. So it's still out there, but hey, again, as long as it can't be perceived to be mistaken as a stability sample. Okay, how are we doing? Oh, we got 1 more minute. So
Maybe I'll close that out by telling people that at Stability Hub, as we look towards the potential for gathering advertisers, we very much like to raise our number, which used to be about 850 up to the 1,000 mark, and we could achieve that quite readily if each of you would get one of your people on your staff to subscribe to us as well. It's just an email that they can delete if they don't like it. You can always unsubscribe too, but we'd like very much to increase our subscriptions. And for this day, we're glad that you joined us for celebrating Stability's birthday and Arrhenius's birthday as well. And we're looking now down on the Pasadena Boulevard, and the Svante Arrhenius float is now approaching the stand. So we know that the parade is just about over. We hope you're going home with a great deal of stability information, some ideas that you hadn't had before, some cautions that you can take home. And we look forward to joining with you again at some point in the future. So thank everyone, and we'll be signing off.
Thanks, John.
Thank you to our SMEs as well for chiming in and joining us.
Absolutely.
Sure. Thanks, everyone.
John.
Have a good day.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.